Welcome back to Murder in the Black. It is your host, Steph.
And I'm MD.
Let's go ahead and get into our true crime case for today.
So grab your coffee if it's the morning, your lemonade if it's the afternoon, and your wine if it's the evening. But either way, let's get into it.
December 31st, 2019, police were dispatched to an alleyway in North Minneapolis. After receiving a call of gunfire around 6:38 p.m., North Minneapolis was known for violence, and it's actually known for shootouts between rival gangs. So they weren't expecting to necessarily see anybody murdered. They were expecting to see gunshots go off, right? When they descended upon the area, they were frightened to actually find a body in the alleyway. There was a woman who was shot a total of 3 times, 1 to the face and 2 to the upper torso. Her wrists were bound with duct tape and her mouth also was taped. Based on all the blood on the scene, they were able to determine that she was killed in the alleyway. They found 1 to 2 spent shell casings, which belonged to a .45 caliber gun. And they also found a half-empty realtor lockbox on the ground. Now, they didn't know where that fit into the crime scene, but obviously it was relevant. And the police had no way of identifying the body at the time because there was no ID found along with the body. But before the clock would strike 12, arriving a new year, the mystery would be revealed. Monique Latrice Leanne Baugh was a vibrant 28-year-old woman living in Minneapolis, known for her devotion as a mother, girlfriend, and daughter. She attended Robbinsdale Armstrong High School, where she was recognized for her magnetic personality and unwavering confidence. And I kind of want to stay here on her unwavering confidence because her cousin remarked that she had the type of confidence where you knew she could do anything. Like even if she couldn't do it, she had that type of confidence where you felt like she could. And I just think that's a very good quality to have because honestly, it can be infectious. You can inspire people to do things they could never imagine. Monique shared an especially close relationship with her cousins, whom I affectionately feel like I refer to, and it's also popular as sister cousins. You're so close and you grew up together that you kind of have a sister relationship, but you also have the kinship, of the cousin. It's just a added bonus. And her cousins grew up together. They navigated the complexities of motherhood and life challenges together, providing mutual support and understanding. They went through the same things at the same time. Monique embarked on a new career path in real estate. She successfully obtained her license, joining the Chris Landau Real Estate brokerage, envisioning a fresh start for herself and her 2 children. Monique had 2 daughters, Legend, born in 2016, and Legacy, born in 2018. And in 2019, they were 3 and 1 years old. She was in a relationship with their father, John Mitchell Momoh, a rapper described by family as the love of her life. Momoh was very popular in Minneapolis, but also was popular amongst major artists like Nipsey Hussle and Lil Baby. He possessed a flashy persona, and this is one of the attributes that actually made Monique attracted to him. He was the typical rapper, flash money, but really had a great personality. Now, they went through the typical ups and downs of a relationship. However, they maintained a very positive connection. As the year approached its end, Monique was actively closing deals and completing appointments. On December 30th, an opportunity arose for a last-minute sale in Maple Grove, which Maple Grove is a suburban city there in Minneapolis. So this was where she had one of her prospective sales. She received a voicemail from someone identifying themselves as Lisa Pulowski. requesting to view the house. They scheduled the appointment for 11 a.m. Monique goes to the house to await her 11 a.m. appointment, but Monique encounters another agent, which is not uncommon when you're a realtor. She engages in conversation and slowly waiting for time to go by so that she can meet with Lisa. But this is when she receives an unusual phone call from Lisa, and she asks a question about the stove. Monique thought it was odd, but you're familiar with oddities when you're a realtor. She answered the question and ended the call awaiting Lisa's arrival. However, Lisa never showed up. It was common for a realtor to have a couple of no-shows. Monique really thought nothing of it and left for the day.
Typically, regardless of having children or not, people make plans for New Year's Eve celebrations. We all do. And Monique and Momoh were no different, and they had their own individual arrangements. He planned to go out for a night on the town, while Monique, decided she was going to host a cousins night. This cousins night was started from Monique. Monique created it, and really because she just valued spending time with family, especially her cousins, and she thought it would be a great way to gather everyone together, enjoy some good cocktails, let the children play together, have good card games, and just that nostalgic vibe of playing games like Truth or Dare. This particular game night, they planned to make tacos, and Monique even volunteered to bring the salsa verde. However, as is common in real estate, last minute appointments typically happen. And my husband does real estate, and I tell you what, those last minute appointments definitely come in, and you have to take them because you want to make sure that you can get the deal, because you never know if that's the one appointment that will lead to closing the sale. Even though it was a holiday like New Year's Eve, when Lisa Pulowski called to schedule this last minute appointment the day before, she decided, call her back. I'm going to arrange another showing. I want to make sure I get this girl in, but let me just make sure that we can get a time and date that works for both of us. So they agreed that they would meet at 3 p.m. Monique reached out to Momoh, who agreed to watch the children. She just made sure that her children were taken care of while she went and conducted her business. She left the house around 2:15, and while she was en route to her appointment, she was on the phone with Josie, which is her sister cousin. She talked to Josie as she set up the house and turned on the lights and got the house ready for the showing. She mentioned to Josie that she didn't think the people would show up today, but she decided to show the house anyway. She resolved that if they weren't there by 3:10 p.m., because remember the appointment was for 3, and if she said that if they weren't there by 3:10 p.m., she was going to leave. Now, as the time passed, she told her cousin that she thought she would start packing up, but she noticed that they were there.
Remember now, Lisa Pulowski was the same person that set up an appointment on December 30th at 11 a.m., but she didn't show up. Lisa Pulowski calling her back the very next day to set an appointment at 3 p.m., and she already felt like, well, girl, you didn't show up the day before. Are you really going to show up today?
Monique told Josie, her cousin, I'm going to call you back once, I get them in, show them the house. I'll give you a call back. But Monique never ended up calling Josie back. Josie ended up calling her around 3:30 p.m. because she's like, okay, this is unusual. Typically Monique is going to call me back. But Monique didn't answer the phone. And so she sent a text, but when Monique didn't answer the phone, a text message came in that said, can I call you right back? Josie knew that text wasn't like Monique to her. And we all understand what that means, right? You know how somebody that you're really close to, who you text and communicate with often, you know how they talk in text. If they use, shorthand, emojis, no emojis, they send long text paragraphs or, several text messages. Their tone, even in a text message. Josie, when she receives this, knew that this wasn't like her. At 3:45, Josie called her again, but this time it went straight to voicemail. Meanwhile, Wanda Williams Baugh, which is Monique's mother, was at work, and she was unaware that Momoh was watching the children. Her routine after she, finished her job was to go to her locker, retrieve her belongings, but she always checked her phone. At 5 p.m., her routine started. She checked her phone and she found a text from a neighbor that simply said, "Call me." And he informed her that a man had been shot at her house. She called Monique several times, but she received no answer.
You have to understand that this appointment was last minute. So usually Monique, which was Wanda's only child, they communicated constantly, and Monique and Wanda shared a home together. When she heard this message from her neighbor that a man was shot at her home, she immediately calls her daughter because she's like, well, my daughter would be at home. Why isn't she not picking up the phone? That's urgent news. She immediately goes home.
And when Wanda arrived at home, she learned through the police and EMT that Momoh had been shot multiple times. He was rushed to the hospital, but the children were safe. So, luckily and gratefully, the children were not injured. She continued to try to reach Monique during this time because she's like, okay, where is Monique? She's nervous. She continues to try to reach Monique, and she cannot get through. She never answers, which is completely uncharacteristic because, like Steph said, they were in constant contact. They were very close. And if you followed the story so far, you know that Monique is a family-oriented person. And she's very close to her cousin. She's very close to her mom. So the fact that she's not answering the phone for either one of them is completely outside of her character. And one of the first things that Wanda said to law enforcement was maybe Monique had been taken by the same person that shot Momoh, because this just doesn't make sense. This is not like my daughter.
Wanda is talking to the police, and they're collecting things on scene within her home. Wanda notices a single key lying on an area rug in the living room. And this key was unique because it was a key that Wanda bought for Monique. It was a house key, and it was purple with a butterfly on it. She knew it was Monique's key, but Monique always kept that key on her keychain. What was odd was that it was just this single key. So if Monique was gone, why would her key be present? This only intensified Wanda's anxiety and feeling about not being able to reach her daughter. Shortly after being on scene, police learned from a dispatch notification about a crime that took place earlier that night. It notified police that an unidentified woman had been shot in an alleyway in North Minneapolis, and they learned of a missing woman. By 7:15 p.m. on New Year's Eve, the other investigators from the original crime scene that I told you guys about at the beginning of the episode arrived at Wanda's home. But before they arrived, one of the questions that police who were on scene with Wanda asked her, did Monique have any tattoos? And she said yes. Monique had a tattoo on her hip that said Heartbreaker with a butterfly on it. And the police took that information, and there's actually body cam footage that you guys can go see on YouTube, and he immediately knows that it's Monique that's in the alleyway. And he's trying to compose himself in front of Wanda. He just tells her, okay, ma'am, she's still asking questions. Okay, so but she has another tattoo. So she's trying to give him information. He's like, hold on really quick. I'm going to go check some things out. And he steps out of the home, and he's like, damn, man, this is Monique, who you found in the alleyway. She has 2 children. She's dead. And he's heartbroken. He has to go back in and give that news to Wanda. And Wanda was devastated. This was her child, her entire world. And I can't imagine the type of devastation. I've experienced it myself, not in a violent crime, but knowing that you saw somebody at the top of your morning and by the evening they're deceased. I can't imagine the emotions that Wanda went through upon hearing that news. Now, when investigators from the other crime scene get to Wanda's house, that they now know that it's Monique, they arrive and they're trying to figure out, are these crimes connected? Because It's not a coincidence that Monique is found in the alleyway and Momoh, her boyfriend, is shot. But they're not sure, so they're still investigating. Now, when they arrived, there were several bullet holes going up Wanda's stairs, and a .45 caliber shell spent casing was found in the upstairs bedroom along with a pool of blood. This pool of blood belonged to Momoh. And as they began to investigate and just look around, they believe that these crimes are connected. The head investigator was committed to bringing justice to this family. Now, across town, Monique's cousins were awaiting her arrival for taco night. And as cars went by, they kept thinking, this is Monique. She's going to show up. But they called her and her phone was going straight to voicemail. Eventually, not being able to get in contact with Monique, they called their Aunt Wanda to see where is Monique and when is she coming. But when they called their Aunt Wanda, Wanda just received the news that her daughter was deceased, and all she could say is Monique's dead. And one of her cousins said, all I could do was hang up the phone. And I don't want to dismiss this part. I kind of want to unpack it just a little bit. But that type of devastation and trauma from losing your loved one in that kind of violent way, what do you think about that, MD, and having to digest that type of news, both Wanda and her cousins?
I think obviously they were in shock, and I can't imagine it. I cannot imagine what it feels like to, you're anticipating seeing your loved one. You're literally at an event that they planned, your loved one planned, and you're just waiting for them to show up only to hear, oh no, they're dead. I can relate, right? To getting a call, you being completely oblivious that, anything is wrong, and you get a call while you're doing something else and finding out that your loved one is dead. I mean, it rocks you. It's like, I think it's almost like the best thing I can use to explain it is like being hit by a train. Like what I would imagine being hit by a train felt like. Like it just, your whole body just aches, and you very literally feel like your heart is outside of your body hurting. I mean, like when they say heartbreak, like you really can feel your heart breaking.
What was on the police's mind at this point, once they knew the two shootings and murder were connected, is this over Momoh, or is it over Monique, or is it both? They just had these looming questions that they had to figure out, and this is when the investigation begins.
Wanda offered information to investigators that recently Momoh had recorded a video of himself in the shower and was flashing money around in the video. After the shower, he proceeded to put all the money in the dryer, and Wanda realized that he shot the video in her home and used her appliances. She communicated to Monique that being this flashy had the possibility of drawing negative attention and could possibly bring, harm to the family. This was posted on December 16th, and by December 31st, Monique was killed. She's wondering, could this possibly be linked? Could this possibly be the reason why, Momoh was shot, why Monique was murdered? Investigators looked at the cameras in the alley, and they saw that a U-Haul was seen exiting the alley immediately after the shots were fired. And a witness came forward and claimed to see that same U-Haul at Monique's house. Monique's black BMW was missing, but they inevitably found Monique's vehicle in an empty house that was being sold in Maple Grove. They arrived late at night on December 31st, and the lockbox was half empty. Monique's body was found with half of an empty lockbox, right? And so when investigators arrived at the empty house, they found the other half of that lockbox that was found on the scene, and they connected the two. They saw a pink acrylic nail on the ground, which showed signs of a struggle. They're presuming that this is Monique's pink acrylic nail. And video surveillance was available across the street because, we live in those times where you don't know who has a camera. They viewed that video surveillance, and they noticed that a U-Haul circles the street and comes back around, and a person gets out and approaches the door and walks in and stays inside for about 10 minutes. Then the driver of the U-Haul pulls into the driveway, and then a bigger man walks into the house, and then minutes later the garage opens. He goes into the house, and one man had Monique and pushed her into the truck, and they left at about 3:15. The shooting at Wanda's house took place at about 5:45 p.m. Momoh was actively pursuing his music career during their entire relationship. So investigators go to the hospital to interview Momoh because they're trying to see, like, does he have any enemies that we need to know about? Is there anything that we can tie this whole thing to? When they go in to talk to Momoh, they first deliver the news that Monique was shot and killed, and he was absolutely distraught. But he tried to push through his grief to be able to answer the investigators' questions, because obviously he's wanting to get to the bottom of what happened to him and what happened to his girlfriend. And police asked him to recall any information that could possibly help them solve this case.
Momoh explains that the exchange when he met up with Monique that day for him to come over and watch the kids was normal. They exchanged a kiss before she left, and she went about her way. He was back at the house awaiting Monique's arrival, noting she was a woman of her word. If she said she was going to arrive, you can bet your bottom dollar she was going to arrive. You can set your clock to it. And it was past the time that she was supposed to be back at home. So Momoh called her several times, but she didn't pick up the phone or arrive back at the house. 30 minutes to an hour later, he knew that something wasn't right. Couldn't figure out what it was, but just felt like this was off. The door immediately opens, and a man in all black with a black mask begins to shoot him while he's on the stairs. He climbs the stairs, and he's shot in the back, in his leg, and once in his armpit, with another bullet landing an inch away from his heart. Now, I want to remind you guys before I keep going with this story that his 3-year-old and 1-year-old were at the house asleep. He's on the stairs. His 3-year-old is on the couch asleep. The 1-year-old is upstairs asleep. Now, he's going up the stairs as these shots are blaring. It is a blessing. God's plan that those children were not killed and or hurt. Now, investigators believe the whole reason for taking Monique was to get Momoh, because you remember that single key that they found? And I want to elaborate on this, that she was captured at 3:15, but there was time before they arrived at Wanda and Monique's home. They arrived around 5:45 p.m. So you're saying to yourself, what was going on between that time? But Monique knew that her kids went down for a nap at 5:30 p.m. So she was doing everything in her power to protect her kids as much as she could. And so that's what was going on in between that time. Momoh mentioned that he didn't believe he had any enemies, but there was one guy. His name was Lyndon Wiggins, aka LA. And so for the rest of this podcast, we're going to refer to him as his nickname, LA. And this name was not unfamiliar to police officers. They actually knew him. He was a distributor of narcotics. He was a drug dealer. He pushed dope. But that isn't how Momoh knew him. Momoh knew him because they were both signed to Black Bag Records, and they both made their own videos, music videos, and were not competition, but they were on the same label. They were label mates. Eventually, LA was dropped from Black Bag label, and there was a bit of a falling out between Momoh and LA. And according to Momoh, the fallout was surrounding when Momoh started working on a song called West Side. And this song picked up speed, and Nipsey Hussle decided he wanted to be a part of the song. Now, this is back when Nipsey Hussle was like, he's always been an underground rapper for the most part, but he was picking up steam and he was heavily going into mainstream. That crossover takeover right before Nipsey died, he was right in his bag. And this is around that time. So to get a cosign from Nipsey Hussle and not just the city of Minneapolis is a big deal. Right? So when LA found out about this, instead of congratulating and, do what you're supposed to do for your label mate, he decided to get a little jealous and decided to go and record his own verse and then bring that in to Momoh and say, hey, maybe you can try me a feature on West Side. But when all was said and done and they finished the production, Momoh decided that he wanted to just feature Nipsey Hussle. And when LA found out about this, it ruffled his feathers. And according to Momoh, they had a conversation. Everything seemed to be cool. They seemed to squash it. But Momoh knew there was still some ruffled feathers, but didn't think the beef was big enough that it would result in death. But he had to let the police know, hey, this could be a possible person you may want to look into. This was a complex homicide with a lot of moving parts. And so they didn't put a whole lot of stake into the LA situation. But I want to be clear because, and I know y'all gonna laugh at me, but I love TikTok and I watch a lot of police on their body cam picking up people. And they tell people from the start when they walk in, they say, our job is to investigate. We're not saying you did it. We're not saying you didn't do it. We're investigating, and wherever that evidence leads us is where it leads us. And I think sometimes we can forget that because you're like, okay, so he threw out this name, so it's him. Not necessarily, because how many times we've been in cases and they'll throw out a name and then they're able to rule that person out. So I just want to make sure we always remember that. Investigators knew they needed to find the U-Haul, and using a license plate reader, they were able to track it down on January 2nd of 2020. Now, can we just talk about how fast moving this case was? Because by the end of the night, they knew that it was Monique. They knew that it was tied to Momoh, and they found her car all in the same night, y'all. So by January 2nd, they found this U-Haul. And when they go and look at the U-Haul, the first thing that they notice is that the back of the U-Haul was pulled up and it smelled like bleach and ammonia, which I know womp womp is very sad because that implies that somebody cleaned up the area. And although the back of the truck was empty, they found 4 pink acrylic nails.
I mean, if you're gonna clean with bleach and ammonia,
one would think. But you know, criminals are dumb.
I mean, seriously, because you couldn't just do an extra sweep and make sure. I'm glad they didn't, because obviously this helps us solve the case. But
to that point, investigators say there is no such thing as a perfect crime because you're going to leave something behind, even the most insignificant thing. And so when they go to the front of the truck, they see Gorilla Tape wrappers. Now, I'm not talking about the Gorilla Tape, just the wrapper, right? And it's in the front passenger door. And based on that wrapper, when they take it in for forensic analysis, they find fingerprints on it, y'all. Okay? So even the wrapper, it's always something you leave behind. Based on the rental agreement, they're able to track down the people who rented the car or rented the U-Haul. And they found out that these were drug users. And the drug users, they sang like a canary bird. And they said that they were paid by Cedric Berry with heroin to rent the U-Haul. So basically, let's be clear, I do drugs. And I only did this to get my drug. Because, hey, it is what it is. Cedric Berry was familiar to law enforcement as well, but was not known to Monique or Momoh. When they tried to connect him through Monique and Momoh, they couldn't. So this started to raise questions about, is this the people we're looking for? How are these people connected to Momoh or Monique? 6 of Cedric's fingerprints, once they identified that it was Cedric's fingerprints, he was already in the system. So I told you they had fingerprints on that wrapper of the Gorilla Tape. Well, they belong to Cedric. They needed to identify another person involved. And one officer who already knew of Cedric Berry said, oh, you know what? He hangs out with Barry Davis. He was a close associate of Cedric Davis. He was actually his brother-in-law. So both of these guys, Cedric Berry and Barry Davis, are low-level drug dealers. And one of the investigators said, well, Barry actually works underneath LA. This is how they're able to connect the pieces of the puzzle. And they said he had beef with Momoh. Did he hire these low-level drug dealers to carry out the murder of Monique? U-Haul. And they found out that these were drug users. And the drug users, they sang like a canary bird. And they said that they were paid by Cedric Berry with heroin to rent the U-Haul. So basically, like, let's be clear, I do drugs. And I only did this to get my drug. Because, hey, it is what it is.
So investigators began to just dig deeper into LA, and they learned that at the time of the murder, LA was being investigated by the feds for his heroin and fentanyl operations. So he's not the low level, he's the big dog, and they're investigating him. And when the feds are investigating you, you are a big you're a big dog. They find physical evidence, specifically text messages, that did reveal that there was a feud between LA and Momoh. But by April 2019, they were able to learn through these text messages that LA and Momoh were no longer talking, right? And they learned that Momoh was taken in on some firearm charges around this time, and then was released a few days later. And around the same time, LA's residence was raided for marijuana. Now, these text messages that the FBI retrieved revealed that LA believed that Momoh snitched on him. I'm going to just run this back for your timeline so that you can make sure y'all are following with me. They're going through these text messages. And just remember, guys, your text messages are never truly deleted. So they're going through these text messages, and they're able to see that, okay, there is this beef between LA and Momoh. And they know about the beef allegedly from what Momoh tells them in the hospital. However, based on these text messages, they're learning that this beef may not be all about this label, because Momoh actually was arrested and was, on some firearm charges, but then he was released a few days later, never charged for these firearm charges. And then shortly after he's released, LA's house gets raided, and LA's thinking two and two, let me put two and two together. This looks like maybe Momoh snitched on me. And then you got this social media video showing Momoh in the shower. Remember, Wanda told him about this video, flashing his money. And so this all intensifies LA's jealousy and bitterness for Momoh, because he's thinking, oh, he's a snitch. He's still with this label. I'm not. He's making moves. I'm not. He's not feeling Momoh. Then 2 days later, Monique is found dead. Now, despite the lack of direct physical evidence tying LA to the murder, investigators believe that he hired Cedric Berry and Barry Davis. Investigators go and they arrest Cedric, and they're hoping, hey, maybe we can get them to talk. Cedric initially refuses to talk. They search his car, and they unearthed a couple of things that confirmed his involvement in the crime. Specifically, he had that gorilla tape that Steph told us about that had fingerprints on it, which was identical to what was found on Monique, and the wrappings that they found in the U-Haul. They also found a two-way radio. Investigators knew that Cedric Berry and Barry Davis hung around this specific Walmart. They're known to the police, obviously. And so they go to this specific Walmart and ask to review their surveillance footage. And it captured Barry purchasing that two-way radio, bleach, ammonia, and so it corroborates this is all linked, and then they have receipts showing that they made these purchases. Investigators, now armed with all this physical evidence, they turn to cell phone records, and particularly those of Monique's cell phone. It reveals an unusual communication, including a voicemail from Lisa.
If you remember, at this particular appointment on December 30th, Lisa called Monique and asked her an unusual question about the stove. Now, we have context to what this conversation was, and one of the things that Lisa said is that her and her husband were betting if the stove was gas or electric, and she needed her to settle the bet. And so, of course, Monique gives her the information and was awaiting her arrival, but she never showed up. Well, we find out that the reason why Lisa, quote unquote, Lisa, never showed up was because they were scouting the home in Maple Grove. Cedric Berry and Barry Davis, they were on the outside of that home looking to see if anybody was there, and they saw another car, as well as Lisa heard on the phone another voice. And that is why ultimately that appointment was canceled. So they were just exploiting the vulnerabilities of being a realtor, just a outright exploitation. They were tracking her down. This was a staged attack, and this was confirmed by the police during this time.
Elsa Segura was well known to FBI agents because if you recall, LA was being monitored and observed by the feds, and what they uncovered was that there was this relationship between LA and Elsa. So as they uncovered it, they decided, hey, we need to monitor her because why? She is the head of county probations. And so they're listening in to Elsa and LA's phone calls to just make sure that, like, hey, is she connected? Has she flipped? Is she, good, bad, indifferent? We need to find out. And they learned that, she has some shady dealings, and so they end up firing her. They fired her before the murder of Monique. And as the FBI is listening to Lisa, right, Lisa Pulowski's voicemail to Monique, they immediately identify Elsa Segura. They're like, that's Elsa. That we know who this is. This isn't Lisa Pulowski. This is Elsa Segura. That breaks the case wide open, and they are able to completely link LA to this crime.
Momoh kept the location of Monique and her mother's home a secret. Nobody ever really knew. It was a big time figure, and so he never wanted to have any harm or danger come to his family. Now, the inference from the evidence that police collected suggested that LA approached both Cedric or Barry Davis and offers to pay them in cash or drugs to carry out the shooting of Momoh. They go and they have evidence, surveillance footage of Barry going into the cell phone store, buying a burner phone. They give this burner phone to Elsa, and she sets up the appointments. The police have everything they need. They have a connection to LA where they once didn't. Now that they have Elsa, they're like, maybe we can get Elsa to flip. They bring her into the station. They play the voicemail, and they say, hey, we know it's you. You might as well just tell the truth. You already in trouble. I mean, because she was for having a romantic relationship with LA in the first place. And she admits that it is her. But she claims that she didn't know what was going on, and she had no idea that somebody was going to be murdered. And so they do a forensic analysis on her cell phone, and they find searches that she conducted the night of the murder. She tried to Google confession immunity in terms of the law, and she even searched an incinerator. And she had a lot of long conversations with LA. They bring in LA. Now, they knew he probably wasn't going to flip, but they tried. I mean, that's what you have to do as an investigator. And he, of course, maintains his innocence, said he would never do anything to Monique. And by the way, he did vacation with Monique before because at one time he was cool with Momoh. So he actually knew and met her personally. He said, I would never do that to them. I put that on everything, which is always sus whenever anybody says that. They charge all 4 individuals, and actually they end up charging 6 people, but we'll get into that a little later. They charge them with aiding and abetting, premeditated first-degree murder, aiding and abetting attempted premeditated first-degree murder, because, of course, Momoh didn't die, but they tried, aiding and abetting kidnapping, aiding and abetting first-degree felony murder while committing kidnapping. Yeesh. And they had good evidence and great witnesses. And the trial was powerful and impacted the community of Minneapolis. Police believe that Cedric Berry was the one to carry out the murder. He pulled the trigger. And all of them were sentenced to life in prison. There is an update about the sentencing. The office originally charged, I said 6, but it was 5. They charged 5 people in the case. And in June of 2020, an Hennepin County jury convicted Cedric Berry, Barry Davis of aiding and abetting, premeditated first-degree murder. All of those charges I listed before. A judge sentenced both Berry and Davis to life in prison, along with Elsa Segura and Lyndon Wiggins, aka LA, with life in prison without the possibility of parole. But Shantae Berry, which was Davis's sister and Berry's wife, received probation for aiding an offender. So they were helping them in some way or form. Earlier last year, the Minnesota Supreme Court reversed the convictions of both Segura and Wiggins, sending their cases back to Hennepin County District Court for retrial. The Minnesota Supreme Court reversed the convictions. The justices said that the trial judge gave the jury erroneous legal instructions on the liability of accomplices that might have affected its findings. Elsa Segura actually decided she didn't want to do a retrial, and she pled guilty to kidnapping, to commit great bodily harm, terrorize, and the judge sentenced her to 240 months, which translates to 20 years in prison. The agreement called for an upward departure from the state sentencing guidelines based on the cruelty of the crime and the involvement of the 3 or more perpetrators. And currently, right now, LA is awaiting trial. That is the case of Monique Baugh. Let's get into our takeaway. The Monique Baugh case at its core was a senseless crime cases. I mean, we can all agree that most crimes are senseless. While the circumstances surrounding this case are particularly egregious, it serves as a reminder of the on-job hazards faced by realtors and the importance of maintaining strict safety protocols. I myself am a hairstylist, and there's just a liability in meeting people you don't know. I mean, you don't know if the person that you made an appointment with is the person that's going to show up, or that they don't have ill intentions when they arrive at your door or whoever's door. And so real estate agents find themselves in vulnerable situations, and we have to come up with some safety precautions. So whether you are a expert or a novice and you are hearing my voice, I want to remind you of some of the safety precautions that you can do in order to secure yourself. Agents are strongly advised to thoroughly vet new clients by initially meeting them via Zoom to verify their identities, gather detailed information about their needs. And if anything feels amiss or raises red flags, you don't feel well about something, err on the side of caution. Cancel the appointment. It's easy for safety precautions to slip your mind when you're focused on booking appointments and closing deals, but diligence is paramount. No one ever anticipates finding themselves in a situation like Baugh faced. but evil exists, and it's crucial to be prepared. That's our case for today. Let us know if you knew about this case. The update on Elsa Segura is a new piece to this case. We want to hear from you in the Instagram comments. But let's go ahead and get into our Black History fact for today. We're going to be telling you the remarkable story of Vivine Thomas, the Black man who helped invent heart surgery with only a high school education and no formal medical training. Vivine Thomas developed surgical techniques that revolutionized heart surgery. Thomas was the first African American without a doctorate degree and only a high school diploma to perform open heart surgery. Thomas began his career in medicine in 1930 in the laboratory of Dr. Alfred Blacklock at Vanderbilt University, where Blacklock trained him as his surgical assistant. Due to the racism of the time, Thomas was ineligible to be a student or faculty member at Vanderbilt in the 1930s. Although he did the job of a laboratory assistant, Thomas was classified and paid as a janitor. Thomas's intelligence and outstanding ability as a researcher and surgical assistant was so impressive that Dr. Blacklock requested Thomas to follow him to Johns Hopkins University in 1941. Blacklock became chief of surgery at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland, insisting that Thomas be hired for his team. They worked together on treatments for high blood pressure, traumatic shock, and in the 1940s, Thomas himself led the team which developed a surgical treatment for blue baby syndrome. Despite the racism barriers, Blacklock and Thomas worked as partners in conducting pioneering research in heart surgery. This work was essential to furthering the development of open heart surgery, building the surgical foundations laid by Dr. Daniel Hale Williams, the African American surgeon who first performed open heart surgery. Make sure that you share this information that we're sharing with you with your children. It is your responsibility to teach your children Black history. Do not look to the schools. You do it yourself. So we hope that you find these facts empowering, and we ask that you share, if you care, this particular episode with friends and family. We encourage you guys to share our page, our Instagram page in particular, but our Facebook page or TikTok as well. Make sure you tag us in whatever page you share us on so that we can know and enter you guys in those 2 giveaways that we are currently holding in the month of February. Want to remind you every episode, and until next time, this is Murder in the Black.